Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Zabonik, editor of Club Solutions magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Presenting today is Raj Sareen, the president of Styku, and he'll be discussing how to incorporate body composition into your fitness program. Are you ready to take it away, Raj?
I'm ready. Thanks a lot, Rachel.
All right.
Great. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and a big thanks to Club Solutions for putting this together. They asked us if we'd be interested in doing something like this. In fact, we were thinking about doing something like this anyways, particularly because there's so much value in discussing body composition, and we find ourselves doing a lot of education and thought leadership around body composition in the fitness space. So we felt like this was a really good opportunity to share a lot of those learnings with everyone that's out there. And then in addition to that, start a discussion. And so it looks like we've got a good 40 or 50 people that are there that are signed in. This webinar will probably take about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to try to keep my part to about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then we will go straight to questions. So anybody who has any questions, they'll be able to ask them, and then we'll be able to have a little bit of a short discussion. At the end of the presentation, there will be some contact us information, so you can always reach out to us if you want more information. Okay, so to go ahead and get started here. So the topic today is how to incorporate body composition into a fitness program. Now, this is a broad topic, and to really understand how to get the best value out of measuring body fat and how to use it to motivate members, how to use it to sell PT, how to use it to increase membership retention. We really kind of have to start at the beginning. We really have to understand what are the different methods and instrumentation that you have before you in the marketplace that you can use to measure body composition, right? And what are the pros and the cons of various methods? And to really understand which methods to use, we really kind of need to understand how body composition is really measured in the first place, and what is the most accurate and precise way to measure body composition today. What's going to be the best member experience? Because ultimately, if the member experience is somehow compromised through measuring body composition, that's going to adversely affect your fitness program. So these are all things that we'll consider. I have a small little slide here that's just going to tell us a little bit about what we can expect to learn here in the webinar. The first thing is I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking briefly about who we are, who I am, so you can get in a unique position to be educating people about body composition and how to integrate it into a fitness program. I'm going to talk a little bit about some basics about body fat, just so that we remember, what are the differences between visceral and subcutaneous fat, and why are those differences important? I'm going to have a short science lesson. I promise to keep it really short, about error analysis, and you'll understand why it's very important to understand the difference between accuracy and precision when it comes to measuring body fat. I'll talk about 7 different methods for measuring body fat, and most of them you'll all be familiar with. Some of them are probably going to be new to you, and I think it's going to be important that we all kind of understand the breadth of solutions that are out there today. And not every solution is going to be for everybody, so it's good that we go through every one of them. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is really kind of selling personal training, but that's just going to be an example of a broader way of integrating, body composition into a fitness program. And then I'll give a short demonstration of how we do it at Styku with some of our software, right, towards the end. Okay, so real quick, a few things about Styku. Our company has been in the fitness space for a little bit more than 2 years. We actually started building what we call 3D body scanners for the clothing market in about 2010, so about 7 years ago. And after piloting body scanning in several different industries, we actually settled in the fitness industry and found that we found the most value in that industry of being able to see your body, being able to see what you actually look like in 3D, and we also derived ways to measure body fat. And so a little bit about how we started and our growth in the last couple of years has really been a very incredible part of our journey, where we launched in URSA about 2015, and then we've had about exponential growth over the last couple of years. So we're in about 450 clubs or so globally, and we've performed also about 120,000 body scans in that short period of time. I would say every few minutes somewhere in the world is getting a 3D body scan. I'll talk about body scanning as a category and why it's growing very quickly. It's not just us. There are other vendors in the space, and they're also having great success. I'll talk about why this category is important to the industry and how we measure body composition towards the end. Okay. Oh, and just a few words about me so you understand my background. My background is I'm a physicist. I started this business in about 2011. I started building body scanners in 2010. And then we have a team out here in Los Angeles that has been in the fitness space now for the last couple of years, but our team actually started, again, like I said, in the clothing space. And a great, amazing team of professionals that have great experience both in athletics and the fitness industry, as well as other lifestyle industries. Okay, so moving along here. Now there's some body fat basics that I want to get into. The first thing is, why body composition? Well, body composition is important because we all know weight scales are misleading. And when weight scales mislead somebody into thinking that they're not making progress, ultimately it makes our job as a fitness professional harder, right? We want to be able to educate and demonstrate that they're making progress. Hey, they could be losing fat but also gaining lean muscle, and that trade-off might mean that their weight is staying relatively the same. So measuring body is attractive because it allows us to help demonstrate that they're making progress when they may not see it on the weight scale. Now, of course, body fat is also highly correlated with disease risks, as we'll get into the different kinds of body fat, subcutaneous and visceral. We all probably know this, and if you don't know this, I strongly recommend you do a little bit of research on your own. Visceral fat is by far more dangerous than subcutaneous, even though subcutaneous fat is roughly 80-90% of your fat. Being able to remove visceral fat from your body is extremely important to reducing your risks of obesity-related diseases. So when I talk about obesity-related diseases, I'm talking about diabetes, cancer, metabolic syndrome, respiratory disease, heart disease. All of these are linked to some degree to high body fat percentage. And visceral fat is dangerous because a lot of the toxins that are getting stored in your body are getting stored in visceral fat and are entering the bloodstream and are creating all sorts of havoc throughout your body as a result. Now, knowing your body fat is also a great metric for tracking and therefore also a great motivator. And so when we talk about challenges and we talk about selling PT, being able to assess somebody, build awareness, first of all, about their body fat and their risks, but also be able to track this metric and show that it's changing when, for example, the weight scale is not changing, it's a great motivator. And that obviously is a big part of what we're trying to do as fitness professionals. There are lots of myths around body fat, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time just addressing some of them. Really, they're very important. There are a lot of myths in the fitness industry, and we're very much evidence-based and data-driven in the sense that we try to promote what is considered scientific fact. And try to separate between myths and truths the best that we can. So we'll talk a little bit about a few myths, and we'll also talk about the difficulties in assessing people's body fat and all the different challenges with regards to invasive techniques, techniques that are poor member experiences, and then techniques that take a while, that are time sensitive or space sensitive. We'll talk about all these different challenges. Okay, so moving on. All right, some body fat basics, like we talked about before. There are really kind of two parts to body fat, right? And those are obviously subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Now, in short, subcutaneous fat is the fat that really is the fat right underneath the skin, and the visceral fat is the fat that's between the organs or around the organs. Now, most of the fat in your body is subcutaneous fat. So you can pretty much, pinch it. You can measure it with a measuring tape. Visceral fat will also expand your body considerably, but it's very hard to physically measure. This has been a challenge of body composition devices for a while. Is how do you measure visceral fat? It is the more dangerous fat. All right, so we kind of went through that. I like to show this image of subcutaneous fat because you can get a sense of, here it is. I mean, this is why calipers work well to measure fat, because you can actually pinch it on the body, but the visceral fat, like I said, that's much more difficult to see. And so here you have a left side of an intestinal tract, and you can see very clearly there's not a lot of visceral fat. On the right, you see an example of a lot of visceral fat, and you can see that it has a little orange tinge to it. Fat itself can have actually various colors. It could be orange, a little orange, brownish. It can be white, depending on the type of fat that you're looking at. Okay, accuracy versus precision. Now, there's a few myths, and we're starting with accuracy versus precision. The first myth is really important. The first myth is that there is 100% accurate method for measuring body fat. Today, the only method that actually physically you can see fat is if you actually did an autopsy on a cadaver, where you actually opened up their body and actually scraped out the fat off the cadaver and then put it on a weight scale. And even then, there's a famous doctor once said that even Hannibal Lecter would miss, right? There's still going to be some margin of error in measuring body fat using that method, but really is the only method where you can physically measure fat. Now, the MRI is actually the only method that you can measure fat, explicitly. It's the only device that actually sees fat, but of course, an MRI is quite expensive. It's the only way that you could, on a living person, actually see fat. But even the MRI is, again, going to miss part of the visceral fat that's around the organs because it can't see through the entire body, right? So I'll talk a little bit about accuracy and precision and the difference in a second here, but going on to myth number 2. A lot of people will think that DEXA is the gold standard today, but given the fact that the MRI is actually the only thing that sees fat, and that the DEXA's formulas are actually based on studies done with the MRI, we like to tell people actually the MRI is considered the gold standard. The reason why the MRI doesn't get a lot of attention is, again, because it's very difficult to get an assessment on an MRI. But if you go back to all of the academic research done with DEXA, it's based on correlations where they've done regression analysis with an MRI data set. So they've scanned people both on DEXA and the MRI. So the DEXA itself explicitly doesn't see fat. It actually explicitly measures bone mineral content, right? And in fact, it was originally designed precisely for that. And then they realized, well, once we understand, your bone density and the amount of bone in your body, we could probably use some statistical analysis to determine how much body fat's likely in your body. And it's quite accurate. I don't mean to say that it's not accurate at all. It's actually very accurate. It's probably the most accurate outside of an MRI, but it's certainly not 100% accurate because it's still using a lot of statistical analysis, right? Now, coming back to myth number 3, or coming back to accuracy and precision, accuracy is actually a bit of a misleading metric. The most accurate method may not be the best method, depending on how you're measuring body fat and why you're measuring body fat. So the way that I like to explain it, accuracy is how close you are to the true answer, right? Where precision is how consistently you can deliver a consistent answer. So why is that important? Well, what you're really looking for is always a process or a method or an instrument that allows you to build consistency and precision, because we're trying to measure delta. We're trying to measure how somebody's changing. If a member comes to you and they're 32% body fat on one device, but then you pull out your calipers and you find they're 29% body fat, it doesn't really make sense to argue about the difference and what's the true answer, because in both cases, their body fat is high. What we're really looking for is which one's going to give us a more consistent reading, because we want to measure change. And so if I were to take 3 readings on the same day on both devices, 3 readings on device A and 3 readings on device B, which one is going to be the most consistent in that day? Because that's the device I'm going to trust. Because the body fat's not going to change much in a day, but if that device is giving me the most consistency, I'm going to trust that in 3 weeks, when my member comes back, that the changes that I'm measuring are real changes, and they're not changes that have to do with how much, for example, water there is in their system, or user error in actually using calipers or measuring tapes, right? So briefly about the 7 different methods that we're going to discuss today for measuring body fat. Calipers, which are sometimes called skin folds. There are 3 kinds of caliper methods, or rather 2 kinds that are most of you are probably familiar with. There's the 3-site method, and then there's the 7-site method. Most people don't use calipers correctly. They won't actually pinch or grab the subcutaneous fat enough. And if somebody is not feeling the pain and they're just feeling discomfort, they're probably not getting measured correctly. I mean, it's supposed to be a bit of a painful process, and I think most trainers would try not to inflict too much pain on their members, especially if it's the first assessment they're doing. A tape measure is commonly used in the military. Sometimes it's called taping. In fact, West Point, we just started working with them, and they've been educating us a little bit about how they do something called taping again. The U.S. Navy method is quite well known. It's just a combination of using measurements, circumference measurements of the body, and then correlating that with body fat. Hydrostatic weighing, which is sometimes called the dunk tank. ADP, which is essentially where you sit in not an evacuated facility, but you sit inside of almost like a pod, and they can actually measure the displacement of air based on your body, and then determine your total volume, and then therefore also they measure your weight, so then they can measure your body density. Bioimpedance analysis, which is one of the more popular methods today, where you actually are holding electrodes in your hands or standing on electrodes or both, and current is being bypassed through those electrodes through your body and then back out the other side. A DEXA scan, which is essentially, we just spoke about it a minute ago, a little bit more expensive. And then a 7th category here, a more popular category today, or growing category today, I should say, body surface imaging, or 3D body scanning. So going through these one by one, calipers, most of us are pretty familiar with calipers. Like I said, 2 different methods. Not the most appealing from a member experience point of view, because it's invasive. It's also probably not the most technological option. So you're not going to win a lot of people over by pulling out calipers from your drawer. And so it's just not the best experience. There's a lot of room for error. A lot of people trainers can make mistakes very easily. So you see a lot of variance. So you definitely see a growing trend of people moving away from calipers. But in the end, if you're starting a small studio and you don't want to invest in body comp, it's a very price-effective option as well. So now there's, of course, the tape measure, also very cost-effective. So the general process is you take several different circumference measurements. Usually there are 3 or 4 different measurements on the body. And then there's an equation, just like with calipers, that you plug these measurements into, and it will tell you body fat. Both the calipers and the tape measure are using equations, again, that were developed using other methods and other devices through regression analysis. And they can be very accurate and very precise in theory. Again, the problem with the tape measure becomes the user error. So if you're not, finding a waist or taking a waist measurement in exactly the same place from assessment to assessment, you'll be introducing a lot of error. And the waist, the reason why I say the waist is probably the most contentious measurement that you could take with a circumference or with a tape measure, because even the World Health Organization and the National Institute of Health can't agree on a definition of a waist. And so what you'll find is people will try to estimate different kinds of waists, whether it's the narrowest waist or it's the waist, over the abdomen. Typically, the definition is, halfway between the iliac crest and the first rib. But to measure that, you really have to feel somebody's hip bone and find it, and then find that first rib bone. And that can be, again, very invasive. It can also be uncomfortable to take a tape measurement and put it around somebody. Of course, if they're obese or morbidly obese, it can be very uncomfortable and very hard to get an accurate measurement. If you just use the measuring tape and just keep it a little bit inclined with respect to the ground, then you're going to get, several inch, difference in a core measurement around their body. Typically the user error is about an inch here. You can expect that. And with calipers, and that'll translate to several points of body fat. And same thing with calipers, the usual user error is anywhere between 5% and 10% body fat. Okay? There's the dunk tank, and just looking at this picture, you can tell probably not the best member experience. Sometimes there are trucks that actually, as a service, will come and do a dunk tank service or body fat assessment service for members, because obviously not everybody has all the space required to do hydrostatic weighing in their facility. Again, the idea is around volume and measuring displacement, and doing a hydrostatic weighing, we can get a good sense of body density. And then once we know body density, we typically know how dense fat is and then how dense muscle is. So based on your body density, we can kind of understand the proportion of body fat to lean mass, right? And it's also a very accurate method when done correctly. And the water is nice and warm. Now, also there's something called the Bod Pod, and this is the ADP method. Now, this method is probably the most interesting looking because it looks like somebody's going into a spaceship and they're going to go into orbit. And so it's actually quite a bit of work to get somebody prepared for this. They actually have to wear a sort of a mask on their head in order to make sure that their hair is not not going to interfere with the measurement. They have to be in minimal clothing, and again, it's using the same principle of measuring volume through displacement. In this case, it's not water, it's air. And by doing this, again, we get a good measurement of body density. And the volumes and the body densities measured here are actually phenomenal. They're very, very good for research, very, very good for academics. They just don't translate well into obviously a fitness experience, and that's why we don't see them very often in a club. They also are quite expensive. Now, when it comes to the fitness industry, BIA is probably the most popular today, but there are a lot of different devices out there. And just talking about the science, the basic science is simply your your body is not a very good conductor of electricity. And so if we try to pass electricity through your body, it's going to resist it. And impedance is a form of resistance. And BIA stands for bioimpedance analysis. Now, one of the biggest reasons why your body tends to impede current is because your body's mostly water, and water is a terrible conductor. And so essentially what these devices are doing is they're measuring current as it passes from, let's say, one hand that's holding an electrode through your body and then out another hand. For example, if you grabbed Omron, essentially that's what it's doing. It's passing current through one hand and then through your upper torso and then through your other hand and then back to the other electrode and completing the circuit. What's happening is it's measuring water. It's measuring to some degree the impedance, which is some representation of how much water is likely in your system. Now, since the amount of water in your system can be correlated with the amount of fat in your system, they again use statistical analysis to determine how much fat you likely have in your body. And this can be difficult because if your body water changes by some amount, for example, you burn off all the free glycogen that's in your bloodstream, and your total weight may go down as a result because you lose a significant amount of water in that process. It may think that your body fat has changed considerably, but in fact it didn't, right? So that's where you can get some inaccuracies with BIA. It also becomes very hard to control for this hydration requirement. So you often want to ask people to fast. You want to ask them to not drink any water, which is not always a good thing to ask people to do when they're fasting. Another option is to take several readings throughout the day and then average them so that we have a reading across different hydration levels. There are some more expensive BIA devices. I have a picture here of something called InBody here. Some of these devices, I would believe, are better in the sense where they can get a little bit more data. And of course, they do more of a 4-point electrode system so that you're getting current throughout your body. So technically what is supposed to happen is the current go through one hand, goes down your torso into one leg, through one leg, out the other leg, and then up through your torso and then out of your, like, let's say, right hand. So we complete a circuit that way. Or it may complete a circuit where, and the other devices may act differently, where it just completes a circuit for your upper torso and then another circuit for your lower torso, and then uses both. And why is this important? Well, because the hydration at different parts of your body may be different. The body composition or the amount of body fat in different parts of your body may be different. And that's important because if you're just using a handheld BIA device, you may get a very misleading metric about body fat. For example, if a woman's carrying more body fat in her hips, you may underestimate her body fat significantly using the handhelds. So the idea of having electrodes in the scale itself helps theoretically alleviate that. Now, DEXA is again the X-ray scanner. You lie on a bed, and I'm guessing here. Maybe I could see with just a show of hands how many people here have done DEXA before. Okay, that was a webinar joke. I don't know how many people actually raised their hands. Okay, enough bad jokes. On to my next slide here. So the DEXA is you want to lay flat on the ground or flat on the table, and then it's going to move up and down with this device that's projecting X-rays in your body, and it's going to take about 6 minutes to do that. And the reason why I like to show DEXA is not a lot of people have actually, and the reason why I like to ask questions in presentations, not a lot of people have actually experienced DEXA before. So it's nice to get a visual of what it really does look like. And in most states, there needs to be some certification around actually doing the measurements themselves. Someone needs to be trained. In some cases, they need to be certified medically to be able to perform a DEXA scan. All right, and then the last category here is 3D body scanning. So this is a new category that's just arrived over the last few years. Now the idea here is it's completely non-invasive, and instead of using X-rays to scan you, so we're not touching your body like a DEXA, we're using infrared light, which is not actually going through your body. It's actually reflecting off the surface of your body. And then once we've got a 3D model of your body, we can use a digital tape to actually take circumference measurements. So Styku is a 3D body scanning provider. I'll show you a little bit about our software in a second here, but just generally all systems out there will use the 3D model to either calculate body fat via the body density, because now they can measure body volume, or via circumference measurements. And circumference measurements is actually a great way of measuring body fat when you use a 3D scanner, because the measurements are much more precise than you would take with a tape measure. Basically, the computer can do a much better job of finding the waste and consistently finding the waste and eliminating that user error. All right. Okay. So how do we integrate all this into a fitness program? Well, there's sort of 6 pillars that Styku believes in of how to utilize body composition to help enhance your member experience and create a more successful fitness program. The first step is using a body composition method or device to build awareness. Think about the health fairs or the fitness trade shows or fairs that you hold in your community, or if you have walk-ins that are interested in learning more about your facilities. One of the greatest ways to use body composition is really just to build awareness about the importance of measuring body fat and why, again, it's so highly linked to obesity-related diseases, and why, of course, it is going to help keep you informed about whether you're making progress. So the first step really is education and awareness. That's how you want to integrate as a first step body composition into your fitness program. So wherever you're doing some education awareness around health, that's an opportunity to really use body composition to build awareness. The next is some sort of assessment. Obviously, we're doing assessment. We want to get a baseline body fat measurement. And the reason why we want to do that is because when we do a follow-up, we want to show that somebody's actually improved, or if they haven't improved, and we can talk a little bit more honestly about what's going on, or try to use the opportunity to build a stronger relationship, or perhaps use the opportunity to educate further about the changes that need to be made to their program, or the changes they need to make on their own, right? The next step is what I call context. Just giving somebody body fat percentage is probably one of the worst things you could do, because somebody is not a number, right? Telling them that they're 30% body fat is first going to have very little meaning for them. Number one, because they don't have a scale built into their minds about what 30% means for most people, right? And we're not talking about fitness enthusiasts or bodybuilders here who will argue all day long about their body fat and whether they're 8% or 7%, right? And they're hyper aware already of their body fat. And we're talking about the average person who's really not that familiar with body composition, and it's very important that you really focus on the messaging here and you build context. Instead of saying you're 30% body fat, maybe giving them an understanding of where they rank compared to other people their age range, or where they rank according to the American Council on Exercise, or some designated scale that's out there. So, for example, if 30% means that they're a little overweight, right, and they're at risk, that's probably a better message. Hey, you're at risk. Your body fat readings and your assessments show that you're at risk. We want to move you to over to the left, or over to the green zone, or a little bit more into this healthier region, whether it's a visual scale or a numerical scale, something that gets them an understanding of, this is what it means to have 30% body fat, right? The next thing we like to talk about is goal setting. The minute that you've built context, you've teed up an opportunity to set a goal, because now you know that you're in this at-risk category, and you could set up a goal that gets you from at-risk to, let's say, some sort of fitness category, right? And so the conversation is very fluid at that point, because ultimately we're here to make improvements, and now we've got an idea of what it's going to take as far as a metric that we're going to measure and a context that we're going to try to improve upon. Now, finally, to the fifth one, program validation. And ultimately, body fat has got to be used as a metric to validate that the fitness program you're investing so highly in is actually working. And there's so many trends that go in and out of the fitness industry. Today, there's HIIT, for example, is a very popular trend. But for those that cross-trained as kids, we've been doing HIIT training all our lives, right? And so there's somebody just put a term to it, and it became popular, right? Now, all these different trends are going to have different results for different people. Using body fat devices and body fat methods to help demonstrate to a member, as well as to trainers and staff, as well as to owners and stakeholders, that this program is working is going to create a lot of confidence with members. It's going to create confidence with trainers. It's going to create confidence with your VP of fitness. Whether you're a small gym or whether you're a large gym, it is the mission of your company. And so having something to help hold everybody accountable for whether we're actually fulfilling that mission is incredibly important, right? So that's one of the most important ways to integrate body composition into your fitness program. And the last is retention. Knowing that you're building confidence with folks and by demonstrating progress, right, or helping educate them better by using body composition as a metric, those that are making great progress or those that are at least understanding why they're not making progress are more likely to stay members. And that's important. We all talk about retention as an incredibly important metric in the fitness industry. This is one of the best ways to improve those numbers. Is we're all here to help improve people's lives through better fitness and health. We're using body fat as a great metric to validate our program. Ultimately, it's going to result in better retention, right? Okay, and before I go to the thank you slide, I just want to show you really quick what it looks like to do those 6 pillars, right? And so we have an example of that in our software, because our software is built to help you go through those 6 pillars automatically. So what I have here is a 3D body scan, right? You can rotate it, you can pan it with one finger, you could zoom. This is a person who was scanned on a rotating platform. It took 35 seconds for her to rotate, and then their camera just projected that infrared light on her, like I showed in that picture earlier before. Now, there is a digital tape measurement that will actually measure her body fat. And you can see those measurements. They're like her chest, her waist. But when we measure body fat, and I just got to move this over here so I can see that, it will use a combination of these measurements to determine her body fat. So I'm going to click on that. You can see these orange circumference lines are actually several measurements that are used for neck or waist or hip or forearms to measure body composition. Now, recall I said assessment is one of the most important steps for integrating body fat or body composition devices into your program. But one of the next important steps is context, right? And so Susan here, for example, we'll call her Susan who got a scan. For her to see that she's 26% body fat, maybe not so meaningful. But for her to see that she's in the average category, according to the American Council on Exercise, which is considered overweight, probably a lot more meaningful, right? We've even associated a color with that. So that makes it easier for someone to get the message that, hey, this is probably not where you want to be, but they can also instantly see where they do want to be. For example, in the fit category, Susan, we'd love to move you a little bit more to the green zone, where you can get in the athletic category, where you can get to 14 to 20% body fat, or maybe just the fit category to start with, which will get you to 21 to 24% body fat. Another great way to build context, coming back to that point as a pillar for integrating Styku or integrating, calipers or whatever it is into your program, you really want to build some sort of idea of how somebody fits with respect to their peers. So the American College of Sports and Medicine has a great scale for this that we built into our system. And I think a few other vendors out there use them as well. So in this case, we'll tell Susan that she's in the 40th percentile. That means 60% of women actually have a lower body fat than she does in her age range, right? Which is 30 to 39, right? So again, now we've built context. Now, once we've built context, it gives us the opportunity to set a goal. So you recall in the last slide, I'll just bring that up again. After context comes goal setting, right? So goal setting is possible now that we know what rank she is, in this case, average. We can just drag this slider over, and Styku, this is the way we do it. We just drag a slider over, and we go from average to fit to athletic. So if she lost, let's say, 11 pounds of fat or 12 pounds of fat, she'd go from all the way to the athletic category, 19% body fat, 12 pounds of fat. So that would be a goal. Let's lose 12 pounds of fat as opposed to just 12 pounds, right? Which we're kind of killing two birds with one stone here, right? Because we're now educating them again about the importance of losing fat here, not losing, total weight. But also we've taken that context and we build it into a goal that makes sense for the member. Do you want to be overweight or do you want to be athletic? I mean, as simple as that. I mean, you may not say that to them, but that's basically what's before them. What is it going to take to get there? 12 pounds of fat loss. And then we have other tools where you can, of course, select the number of workouts you'd like to do. You start building the program. You can decide how many calories you want to consume. And I won't go into those kinds of details here, but I'm happy to schedule a demo or talk through this with our team. Our team's, standing by anytime anybody has any questions about how we do it at Styku. But ultimately, the lesson here is I can use this to start building a fitness program tailored to this particular member and is going to help that member reach that goal, which we have built by building context. And the last thing, of course, was the idea around program validation. And I won't talk too much about retention here, but program validation is they come back and we want to show them that they actually made progress. So I'll show you how we do that at Styku. So let's say she came back. This was actually, a scan I was showing you was actually her last scan, but 7 weeks before that, she'd done a scan. And turning off the tape measure here, we can see visually that she made progress, right? We can show her on our body composition device how much fat she lost throughout her torso. This is probably, in our opinion, obviously we're biased, the best way today to demonstrate fat loss, because as most of you know, fat takes up more volume than muscle does. So if you lose fat but gain muscle, even your total weight may stay the same, your body shape will change dramatically. And measuring that change can be very hard. But with a 3D body scanner, we can actually show somebody how much fat they lost. We actually have some nifty tools to do that, where we can overlay scans together and you can see the changes in somebody's body fat. So red is the before, and then green is the after. And then of course, you can share results with somebody. This and most body composition devices will give you some sort of report or a portal where you can log into, and we're pretty much the same way. Okay, so that is the end of our presentation today on how to incorporate body composition to your fitness program. I hope that you found that it was meaningful. If you have additional questions, we definitely have some time to talk about them and to take them. And so, Rachel, I'm just going to pass it on back to you so you could help field some questions.
Yeah, just 1 second. Let's see if I've got at least one here. Oh, I guess for maybe personal training directors that are on the call, how could you give me advice on how they could pitch to the owners on how to invest in a body composition analyzer like this one?
I'm sorry.
If they're not the decision maker. Oh, can you hear me, Raj?
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
Basically, for maybe people who are listening who aren't the decision makers and who couldn't what advice could you give to them on how to sell the owners on making an investment in a body composition analyzer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, it comes down to, validation of the program, goal setting, and context. These are extremely important parts of the member experience. And today, if a fitness owner really wants to compete on the marketplace, they have to be competing on two things: results and experience. Because everybody is driving the cost down. And just going in with the idea that I'm going to be more affordable, you definitely want to understand what your target market is. Like if you're a budget gym, you're a budget gym, right? And you know what price you need to be in. But focusing too much on price, focusing too much on the services that you provide is going to create a diluted experience for the member. The reason why boutiques are so successful today is because they really cut out a lot of the fat. No pun intended. Basically what I mean is they're focused, their heads down, they have a controlled experience for every member. Everyone gets coaching. It's like one large group training session, right? So I'm talking about the Soul Cycles of the world and the Flywheels of the world, right? Those experiences people identify with. They become part of their brand. They talk about them. There's music. There's whatever. Different companies have different differentiators, but they end up building a lot of stickiness. They end up building a community. People want to come back, right? And they drive great results as a process, right? So a lot of the larger gyms today are really working fast to adopt small group training, and large group training to help build that community and to help enhance their experience so they can have higher engagement and higher retention. Ultimately, you have to be investing in technologies that are going to help enable you to enhance the member experience and demonstrate results. And it has to be something that is integrated into the fitness program. It's not just something that is, something we're going to charge a little extra for. It's got to be something that's a value add across your member journey and membership experience. So really, that's the argument that we find is probably the most successful on the ownership level.
Okay. And then we have another question. Can you export the text data to Excel or a CSV?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have both. We have an export to a CSV and we have a PDF report. And then, you can open up the CSV in Excel. I believe we have a format where you can actually export in Excel, but I'm not sure. I'll get back into that. But once you have it in CSV, you can open it up in Excel. So we also have an API coming out relatively soon as well. So.
And then is the machine suitable for a swimming clinic?
So I'm assuming you're talking about Styku. Is Styku suitable for the question is Styku suitable for a swimming clinic? Well, it really kind of depends if that swimming clinic is interested in measuring body fat. I mean, ultimately, if that clinic is interested in measuring body fat, it's probably going to be very easy to use Styku simply because you could just ask a swimmer to be in their swimsuit, right? So typically the clothing that's required, and that is a constraint of all 3D body scanning devices. Not sure if I touched upon that, but there is a clothing requirement, and that clothing needs to be some sort of form-fitting clothing. And now that is actually a lot easier to control, or as far as making an ask to a member is making sure that they're in their Pilates pants or their yoga pants or their sports bra, or for a guy to wear compression shorts. It's much easier to ask than can you fast on such and such date, right? So in a swimming clinic, it's even easier because they're going to end up wearing compression, swimming attire anyways, right? So absolutely, I think it's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, do you guys, I think that's all the questions that we really have. Is there maybe any frequently asked questions that you guys get from health clubs that you think would be relevant?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we get a lot of questions around clothing, and so I think we addressed that. How to charge or how to monetize, the system, and probably the best way to do that is to either build it into a higher tier membership, or to, use it as a value add to sell, a PT package, and then throw it into the PT package. So it becomes like a conversion tool. Some people will charge, but they'll charge, they'll give it away for free if people are members, and they'll charge for people who are non-members, using it as a great customer acquisition tool, at least with Styku. As far as body composition devices, frequently asked questions, I think we've pretty much addressed most of them. If there's any more questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I think we just have one more about medical practices. With medical fitness being a trend that's increasing in the health and fitness industry. Do you know of any health clubs that are using the Styku to kind of show data that supports a fitness program that maybe a physician would want to refer to?
Yeah, 100%. So the question was, do any of the fitness programs out there that are using Styku work closely with any doctors or physicians or any hospitals? And the answer is yes. So Styku itself is not a HIPAA compliant platform. We don't need to be, because we work directly with trainers and gyms and whatnot. And you'll never find a HIPAA compliant system inside of a gym, for example. But we do work with a company called TrainerMD, and TrainerMD is a partner of ours, and they take our system and they integrate it into their platform, which is HIPAA compliant. And their platform allows a doctor to talk to a trainer, talk to a nutritionist, and share all the information amongst all three parties. And we do recently have a couple of hospitals that have just started to acquire the system. One, I think, is Holy Name Medical Center in New Jersey, that's working with a couple of gyms, including, I believe, a Gold's Gym, and then there's another gym as well. So medical fitness is definitely a trend, and you're going to see more requirements, more integration with physicians. And physicians in this facility happen to be, who have seen the scans, happen to be jumping up and down with the idea that they're going to have access to this kind of data. So there's definitely a drive and a need from the physician side as well.
Awesome. Well, I don't think we have, here we go. How does one show ROI in terms of money, especially when speaking to centers in emerging countries? I don't know if that makes sense, Raj.
Yeah. How does, I'm not sure I understood the emerging country part, but, generally speaking, I'll just talk about ROI again. There's so many different ways to charge. Really, it's going to depend on your business. Some businesses will build it into their existing products, and they won't charge explicitly for it, but everybody assigns a value to it. So they'll assign, like, for example, $50 a scan, so that people know that it is a value that is typically what you would get charged for, let's say, with DEXA or with hydrostatic weighing, for example. So any kind of, I've never seen anybody charge $50 for assessment on calipers, but some of these, more technologically advanced systems, 100% they will charge. We don't necessarily recommend charging, but we recommend definitely assigning a value, so that when you do build it into some sort of service, that you're able to demonstrate that, hey, you're getting this additional value worth about $50 per scan, as a part of this program. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we don't really have any other questions. Is there anything that you want to add, Raj?
No, that's it. Ultimately, body composition is definitely a difficult category to understand. So I'm going to send this, presentation along to anybody that would like it, and, study it. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help any which way we can.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for attending. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.